and we are live. This is the Black Powder Podcast, the only real libertarian podcast on Earth, in the universe, and in the cosmos. I am Marcus Matthews, the only real libertarian to have ever existed in the 50 plus years of libertarianism. Coincidentally, right about my age, so it's like I am the first coming of libertarianism. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Eric Parker, Bold Liberty. I will let him accept the Bold Liberty because as the chief purveyor of libertarianism and liberty, I have bestowed upon him the Bold Liberty moniker this evening. Good evening, Eric. How are you doing, my good man?
I'm good. How are you? And for the record, I came up with Bold Liberty all on my own, super original. Marcus had nothing to do with it.
As usual, Eric likes to steal my thunder as per our chat going earlier into this week. That's why I didn't want to tell him any of my grand questions for our distinguished guest. One of the most influential guests that we've had on this podcast in the history of the Black Powder Podcast, and the other black guy who likes gun show, which Mark Zuckerberg zucked a few years back. So I'm not buying the whole redemption thing with Mark Zuckerberg as of right now. We'll see where it goes, but he kissed Joe Biden's ass, and now he's kissing Trump's ass. There's a common denominator, and that's kissing ass. And with that being said, I want to introduce our guest tonight, the honorable, the distinguished congressman, former congressman from the great state of Michigan, Mr. Justin Amash.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you for coming on. Where do we begin? Because this is a great honor for me, great honor for Eric. I want to thank Eric for reaching out to you and making this happen. But for those who don't know who Justin Amash is, can you give him a intro to yourself?
It's hard to introduce yourself. I've been at this for a while now. I'm a libertarian. I think I was a libertarian since I was a little kid. And I ran for office a few times. I ran for state house, was elected, ran for Congress, was elected, served in Congress for 10 years. And I'm a person who believes in individual liberty, economic freedom. I believe in following the Constitution because I think even though there are some libertarians who think, okay, even the Constitution's not good enough, I think it's the best document that's ever been created for a system of governance, at least at this scale. And so I'm a big constitutionalist too. And, I live here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, grew up here, lived here my whole life, went to Michigan, go blue. They'll be back. They'll be back. And we're the current national champions, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So,
that's an awesome point.
So we're still the national champions. And so I'm a big Michigan fan, and I love what I'm doing. I love working on policy and talking about these issues and trying to advance liberty. That's what I'm about.
Well, I want to give you a little bit, I'm sorry, Eric, a little bit of insight into tonight. We're going to be getting a lot of questions from people that are listening and watching, and I'm going to be posting those. And we already have one, and then I'm going to hand it off to Eric. But this is the first question we have for you tonight from our good homie, Joe. What's your favorite amendment, and why is it the 9th?
Well, the 9th is great. I mean, the 9th is a statement about how our rights extend beyond whatever's protected in the Constitution, whatever's explicitly protected. That just because there are certain things that are stated in the Constitution doesn't mean that's all of our rights that deserve to be protected. So the 9th is extremely important. I think actually the 14th Amendment is very important in a lot of ways that I think not enough libertarians appreciate. The idea of equal protection under the law is important for the idea of the rule of law. And in some sense, at the heart of what liberty is about is this idea that you will be treated equally under the law, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of who you are. And it's a good protection for everyone, because if everyone knows that the law has to apply to everyone, they're going to be careful, not just about, how it affects them, but about how it affects other people, because they don't want it turned against them.
Perfect. Eric?
Yeah, so I was gonna go back to, you mentioned, I guess you finished your introduction on what most people know you for was your time in Congress. Could you tell us like a little bit about how you first got elected to Congress? Maybe touch on like what happened to the Tea Party movement, because that was the kind of a thing around the time you were coming into Congress, and where'd it go?
Yeah, so I was influenced by Ron Paul quite a bit when I was first running for office. I ran for state house before I ran for Congress, and that was around. I ran for state house in 2009. 2007, and I was running for Congress, I guess, in the 2009 2010 time period. And that was around the time of the Tea Party movement. So I grew up around a lot of that. I think that was a good combination of sort of a Ron Paul movement plus a lot of constitutional conservatives and people who were sort of libertarian adjacent. So it was a good combination of people who cared about the kind of things that I was talking about, cutting our spending, making sure that we're being responsible with our overseas military operations, that we're not just extending ourselves all across the world unconstitutionally, fighting all these unlawful wars. I was concerned about surveillance and protection of civil liberties. So there are a lot of things that meshed with the Tea Party movement, and it was good timing for someone like me who's a libertarian coming up at the time of the Tea Party movement. It was very good timing, and I think it made a big difference in my ability to get elected, because I was really young at the time. When I got elected to Congress, I was 30 years old. So I was a pretty young member of Congress, one of the youngest. I think there was only one member who was younger than I was. So it made a big difference that I had a big movement behind me at the time. And I think that what we're lacking right now as libertarians is this kind of big movement. I know some people say MAGA might be that movement, but I think compared to the Tea Party, MAGA is a lot more populist and nationalist, and not as much focused on the kind of things that a lot of libertarians have been focused on, individual liberty and rights. They might talk about it from time to time, but I think the general goals are pretty different. And so what happened to the Tea Party movement is it was doing pretty well up until the sort of Trump movement came along and, sucked the air out of it, sucked the oxygen out of the room. And so I remember I formed the House Freedom Caucus. I was one of the founding members. And that was really thought of and viewed as sort of a Tea Party sort of movement, a Tea Party sort of group. And as soon as the, Trump world came along, that kind of died off. A lot of the things that they were fighting for went away. And you may remember, actually, there was a lot of conflict between Trump and the House Freedom Caucus when he first showed up on the scene. They were clashing a lot because Trump was seen as a big government sort of person. And the Freedom Caucus and the Tea Party movement was seen as a small government, constitutionalist sort of movement. So they clashed a lot. And, Trump is the bigger personality. He ran the stronger ground game, the stronger campaign, and a lot of what was the Tea Party movement sort of withered and got, I guess, subsumed by by MAGA.
Look, so I've been following politics since I was roughly between 10 and 12 years old. I've never met a small government Democrat, obviously, and I've never met a small government Republican ever. I don't think they exist. And that kind of leads us into this from Ted Macy says, how many in Congress, both houses are compromised?
Aren't compromised.
How many aren't compromised? Okay.
I'd say they are compromised. I'd go with are compromised before aren't compromised.
Well, okay, I think it'd be easier to name the ones that aren't.
So this is how I think a lot of people get surprised by this, but most members of Congress, I think, are not in it for some kind of, they have nefarious purposes or anything like that. I think most of them are not very ambitious. They're just happy to be there. A lot of them are not very bright. And it's the best gig they have. It's the best gig they'll ever have. And they're not really scheming, most of them, honestly. They are just happy to be there. And so what looks on the outside like a lot of corruption generally is just people trying to stay in power, stay in office. And they're not actually, I think, most of the time doing it because they have some kind of grand plan. Now, there are about maybe 10% of the members who are schemers and who are what I would call compromised. People who are intentionally trying to do the wrong thing to get ahead, to move up, not just to keep their position. Like I said, most of these members, they're just happy to be there and they just want to stay there. So when I say they're not being corrupt, all I mean is when leadership tell them to press a button, they press it. It's not because they even know what the bill is. Now, we could say that's corrupt in a certain sense, that you're not doing your job, you're being irresponsible, but I think it's more like laziness or indifference. It's not so much like malevolence. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not like they're not out there to like screw people over. They're just kind of lazy and indifferent and not ambitious. And okay, leaders told me to press this button, so I'm going to press it. There's a lot of that. That's the majority of people in Congress. That's probably 70-80% of them are like that. And then, like I said, there's 10% who are schemers, maybe 10 or 15% who are schemers, ambitious, who are corrupt, who are doing the wrong thing on purpose, who are trying to screw people over. And then there's maybe a small percent, it's hard to say, 5%, who are genuinely trying to do the right thing. They might have different principles. We might not agree with them on everything. Some of them might be Republicans, Democrats, who knows? But there might be 5 or 10% who are actually, good people who are trying to do the right thing. They're not going to vote the same way we might vote, but I don't think they're neither the indifferent type nor are they the malicious, malevolent types.
Who would you say you could, I guess, trust their principles to lean libertarian? Obviously, Thomas Massey, number one, I would say. But is there anyone else like under the radar that nobody's paying attention to that they should?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, if you're asking me, when I served there, I kept a Liberty scorecard. I didn't tell the general public about this. My colleagues knew I had this scorecard. I used to get people on the House floor always asking me, "Are you scoring this one?" So I kept track of our votes, and Thomas Massey was so far and away better than the other people that it just wasn't like really competitive in that sense. He and I voted very similarly on most things. Probably, like if my scorecard, if I'm 100% of my scorecard, because it's my scorecard, right?
I hope so.
So I gotta be 100% on mine. Thomas is like 98, 99. Okay. He's like right there with me. After that, you get a big drop off. You're talking about the next highest person is in maybe the mid 80s. So it's not really close. And then the drop off gets steeper and steeper. Once you get to like the 10th best, like most libertarian person, you're talking about someone maybe in the 70s or, some of them you might get into high 60s. So like it's not good generally there from a libertarian perspective. So if you're talking about someone who sticks to libertarian principles, I'd say it's Massey, and it's not really close after that. That doesn't mean I don't have colleagues that I trust and respect and like. Chip Roy's a good example of this, a guy who I think fights for what he believes in. I don't always agree with him. He's more of a conservative. I'm more of a libertarian. But I do think he's fighting for what he believes in.
Well, I want to make a point here. So when I went to college, I went to Alabama A&M University, and I tried to play football there. And there was a coach that always used to tell us that he'd look at guys and say, "You're just happy to be here." He always would say that, "You're just happy to be here. You're just happy to be here." And what he meant by that is you weren't here necessarily for the right reasons. You just like putting on the helmet and the shoulder pads and the uniform and going out there to hit people or do whatever you were wanting to do. But you weren't necessarily here to win a football game. And, you know, he meant that as a motivational thing. And anybody who's ever met me or shook my hand, they be like, "Hey, Marcus, how you doing?" I'm like, I've been saying this for the last 30 years. I'm just happy to be here, because I switched that around. And I say that because I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe there's a lot worse places you could be. And I've been in a lot worse places in my life. And that's what I dislike about Congress is it is a club. It is a show. It is a circus. It's entertainment at this point, because we don't have people who are taking this job seriously, because they have to campaign 265 days a year, and then they work, 3 months roughly a year. And other than that, they're going in front of cameras. And where I think we are right now as Americans is this BS culture war. And I think the culture war is a direct threat to liberty, whether you're on the left or the right. Because right now we're trying to take away individualism and saying these people deserve to be in your space, or these people deserve to tell you how to live. And that goes to my question to you. My main question, because we talked about what we want to ask you, my question is to you is, why did you want to stand against the machine? You knew what you were going up against, but why did you want to do that?
For me, it's a matter of, I just want to make sure that there's someone there fighting for the right things. And I don't know exactly what brought it out in me from a young age, but I'll say my dad came here as a refugee. He's a Palestinian refugee and came here with nothing. And so to me, the whole idea of America is so amazing, so like fantastic. It's really something beyond anything that's happened in human history. And I don't think it can be replicated. Like, I don't think you can, so many things came together to get us the particular constitution we have and the kind of culture we have, the kind of society we have here, where we protect individual rights. At least we talk about it. The government's not always protecting them, but the American people believe in it deeply, even if it's not executed the way that it should be. So I think this is such an amazing experiment, an amazing project, the United States of America. And I want to keep that alive for other people. And when I first got involved, my main goal was just to expose it. I never to expose what was going wrong in government, because I wanted us to get back to our roots, back to what this country is supposed to be about. So I never actually imagined that it would be a platform to become a congressman, because I ran for state house first. I never even imagined at first it was going to be a platform to become a congressman, or that people would really care that much about what I was doing. But I thought someone has to do this. Someone has to expose it. Someone has to start. Maybe others will pick it up and take it further. I think the disappointing thing for me is that there aren't that many people who are picking it up and taking it further. I got Thomas Massey there still. But really, it's kind of sad. We don't have that many people in office who, like, the type of people like a Thomas Massey or a Ron Paul. They are once in a generation, and I don't think we appreciate that enough. We assume it's easy because there are organizations out there trying to get liberty candidates elected, and when you hear that, oh, we got this person elected here and that person elected there. Oh, we got 100 liberty candidates elected. Okay, I can tell you, you could add up all 100 and they're not worth one Thomas Massey. They're just not going to be. Why? Because I've seen it year in and year out. And so for me, I saw myself as someone who was impervious to a lot of the pressure, and I could go and set an example and be that kind of elected official, like a Ron Paul, who stands up for what is right, stands up for the Constitution, stands up for liberty, and at least set some kind of example, even if it wasn't going to make, a huge splash. It did end up making a huge splash, I think, because I got elected to Congress on the same principles that I ran for state house, which was kind of exposing the system. Like when I know this is a little long of an answer, but
No, it's good. Go.
When I ran for state house, I'll give you an example. When I ran for state house, the thing I saw was that the two parties, Republicans and Democrats, were both voting for corporate welfare over and over and over again. I mean, this is, more of like a state level issue, corporate welfare. And in the state house, the votes were going 110-0 in favor of corporate welfare. And I couldn't believe it. I'm seeing this week after week, 110-0, 110-0, 110-0, just handing out money to corporations, subsidies. Here's some, will you build your factory here? We'll give you $10 million. Will you do this? We'll give you $2 million. And it was actually rich people getting money from the government.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Rich people coming to government and saying, hey, can you give us $5 million? And then the legislators are like, yeah, sure. Here's $5 million. It'd be to someone who already is a rich person. And I'm like, this kind of welfare, I got problems with all welfare. Okay. But this kind of welfare is especially crazy, where you're taking from all the taxpayers and giving to rich people. And so I just wanted to run. I mean, really, it's as simple as I wanted to get into the state house to expose this. I wanted to go there and be the one vote and kind of piss everyone off. What's this guy doing voting against the corporate welfare? Why is he voting against this? They call it economic development, right? They don't call it corporate welfare. So I wanted to be that, and I exposed it. And as time went on, when I was in the state house, I was there for one term. It went from 109-1, the vote being 109-1, to being 108-2, 107-3. Eventually, I got to the point, just from influencing people, just by taking a stand, where we defeated a piece of corporate welfare on the House floor in the state of Michigan. And that had never happened. Like, they were shocked by this. And so I saw that as like, okay, maybe what I thought was going to be a little impact, maybe it can be a big impact. That's why I ran for Congress, because I saw that it was working. And I was explaining all of my votes on social media. I was doing it on Facebook back then. So I would explain all my votes to the public, and it was working. Nobody had done that before. And so for me, running for office was purely about how can I expose what's going on in government. I believe so much in this country and the principles of our founding. And how can I expose how government has gone awry and return us to those principles? So that's what it was all about for me.
What's up, Eric?
So I guess I'll mention the elephant in the room. The end of your congressional campaign or career at the time, I'm sure there's room for it later in life if you so choose to pursue it. You were, by some, seen unpopular for a certain vote, and that was to impeach Trump. Could you explain if and how that hurt your brand in the GOP, the Republican Party? Did it have anything to do with you not running for re-election for Congress, or was that more about like the district changing? Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I'll say about impeachment generally, I don't think we impeach enough presidents, and we as libertarians should be against executive abuses. And I want to be clear that impeachment is not a conviction. In the House, impeachment is an indictment. That means it's just a charge. All you need for impeachment is probable cause. So in some sense, I was following it like a lawyer would, and my background's in law. and I was doing it like I was looking at it like a lawyer would. Is there enough here to charge someone? It doesn't mean that there's enough to convict someone. And so there's a lot of things that people get wrong about impeachment. They say like, oh, Amash was thinking there was Russia collusion or whatever. He fell for the Russia hoax. That never happened. I never said there was Russia collusion, nor did I impeach the president for Russia stuff. That wasn't it. But there was abuse of power. There was obstruction of Congress. There was obstruction of justice. And then people say, well, how can you obstruct something if there's no underlying crime? But the whole point of having obstruction of justice as a charge is that if we only charged it when there was an obvious crime, then it would be kind of meaningless. The point is someone tries to obstruct justice to hide the crime. That's the point of it. So that's why it's a separate charge. But setting that all aside, I followed what I believed. I followed my principles. And let's not forget, Ron Paul voted for impeachment for Bill Clinton. So this is not an unusual thing for a libertarian to do. We're against executive abuse of power. So I did what I believed in. Did it cause some problems? Absolutely. I think the biggest issue was that it was not the people who already supported me, because libertarians, they knew what I was about. They understood where I was coming from, even if they disagreed with my vote. And some of them agreed and some of them disagreed. A lot of constitutional conservatives, especially here in Michigan, they knew what I was about. The Tea Party people, they had my back. The problem was I suddenly became more well known to a lot of other people who had not been following me before. So all of a sudden, a whole bunch of people are hearing about Justin Amash for the first time. And the only thing they know about you is you voted to impeach a president that they like. Okay, so that is challenging because they don't have, unlike your diehard supporters or even people in your district, they don't have that 10 or 12-year history of following you and knowing what you're about. So that makes it much more difficult. And so what I would say about running for office is, no, my decision to not run for office had nothing to do with that. In fact, I had told people before that term, so this is long before any of the impeachment stuff came up, I had told family and friends, and even some potential candidates for the seat, that I wasn't going to run again. So this was long before the impeachment stuff. I said, I'm not running again. This is my last term. I'd always planned to stay in Congress for maybe about 10 years, 10 or 12 years. And then I thought I should take a break and try to do something else. Now, the thing I was hoping to do at the time was run for president. But given everything that happened with COVID and the polarization, like the high levels of polarization between the Biden people and the Trump people and everything that was going on, Republicans and Democrats, it became very hard as a libertarian to get off the ground for president. Like, that was not really a feasible election. So I backed out of that. My whole plan was I was not going to run for Congress again. I was going to run for president. That decision was made before any of the impeachment stuff. And it wasn't, the district was, I think I could have won again in the district. Honestly, that my popularity, we were polling the district. My popularity at that time was higher than it had ever been in the district because it's a 50-50 district. So yeah, did I lose some more Republicans? Yeah. And I gained a few Democrats and it kind of like offset. And I got a little more, I think, because some of the independents came along too. So I think I could have won that race again. But I had already made the decision and had told people I wasn't going to run again. And so I stuck with it. I decided to try the thing for president. That didn't get off the ground very far. And so it's not like we were doing pretty well, but I know what you got to do to become like a serious candidate for president. It's not just you have to raise, a few $100,000 or whatever. You got to really, take off. And it wasn't taking off like that. And I never wanted to be a candidate for president who's just there to, fill space. I know that we as libertarians, we've often run candidates for president and they get 1% or 2%. And I never wanted to be that. That wasn't my interest. If I'm going to run for office, I'm going to run for office when I think I can win. And so, there will be future opportunities, I'm sure, to run for office, but I will only ever do it if I think there's a real possibility of winning.
Okay, I just want to stop you right there,
Yep.
Congressman Amash. Don't jump ahead in our segments where we try to push you for the Libertarian nomination for President of the United States in 2028. Stop right there, okay? We're not going to deal with that here on a Black Powder podcast. We're going to get to that subject when the time is right. So I'm going to switch speeds.
All right.
Okay, so we talked about corporate welfare.
Yeah.
And then we have Doge coming into effect in 4 days or so. I would like to see, and I want your opinion on this because this is about government waste. I posted on one of Elon's posts on Twitter. I still call it Twitter, whatever X, whatever, blah blah blah. The first area they should look at in government waste is the low-hanging fruit of corporate welfare and subsidies. We could do away with that immediately and easily save multiple billions of dollars. Why has that just... I have... This is a two-part question because my good friend D asked this as well. She also wanted to know about Mike Johnson removing Massey and your thoughts on that. So first thing on Doge and corporate welfare, and then I'll leave this question up so you can respond to it second.
So, yeah, I absolutely think that corporate welfare should be a target. It's low-hanging fruit. It's easy to go after in the sense that it's not complicated. They just stuff something into a bill, like an appropriations bill, and then you just say, okay, we're not giving out this welfare anymore. It's pretty simple. Now, it's not going to add up to the amounts that we're going to need to actually cut government in a massive way. But in my opinion, you have to start with the things that show if you're going to cut government, the big wigs are going to take a hit, right? Those who are running these big corporations, wealthy people who are getting special benefits from the government, you got to show that they're going to take a hit. Doge is not just coming after everyday Americans and making their lives more challenging because it's cutting some kind of welfare here or benefit there. You've got to show that it's going after the big wigs. And so I think you have to target them first. The problem is these constituencies are ingrained in the two parties, right? So like, I'll give you a good example of corporate welfare that happens on the Republican side is like farm subsidies. And these are often like massive farms and,
corporations.
They're corporations. They're not, I think when we think of the average person who thinks about farms, they're thinking about like, one of those, they're looking at a coloring book and it's like a farm that's, got a few.
Got a red barn and it's
right.
a family running it. It's not.
Right.
It's not in America anymore.
Yeah. So we're talking about massive corporations that are getting welfare from the government. And Republicans love that kind of welfare. I don't mean Republican voters, but Republican politicians love that kind of welfare because there's just the symbiotic relationship, right? They're going to help support these candidates. They're going to endorse these candidates for office, and the candidates are going to give them the corporate welfare when they get elected. So that goes on the Republican side. On Democratic side has the same thing with a whole bunch of constituencies. So the problem is the constituencies. These are they're kind of behemoth constituencies who put a lot of money into campaigns, and it's hard then to wean them off of that to say like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. But that's low-hanging fruit. I think that Doge should go for that. About the Massey issue, Massey being removed. My view on this is my personal view of what's going on here is that it's not really a great situation for Massey on rules in this Congress. Like if he were on the rules committee, imagine a situation where he's on the rules committee. When there's a Democratic president or there's a Democratic Congress or Democratic Senate or something, he can make a lot of arguments that will go a long way to why he's holding something up. He'll say, "Oh, we're not following the 72-hour rule. You know, we don't have enough time to read this." Or the bill is too long, or there's too many subjects in one bill. This should be all split up into a bunch of bills. The problem is during the Trump administration, you're going to have Republicans pushing this stuff. So when there's a bill that they're trying to get through, it's probably going to be a bill that the president himself, Donald Trump, is pushing. And could you imagine having Massey there saying like, "Hey, this isn't following the 72-hour rule, or this isn't doing that." He could do that. He could hold it up, but it's going to be like week after week after week after week after week. And I think that is, I mean, it's possible to do, but I'm telling you, after doing it for 3 or 4 weeks, he's going to get kicked off anyways. You know, they're not going to keep him on there. So from my perspective, it's not good that he's not on rules. Like, I'd like him to be on the rules committee, but I think it's not really like a winnable situation for him. They're going to kick him off as soon as he starts voting against all these things that Donald Trump wants. So, and I'm not talking about on the substance. I'm talking about just on process, right? Donald Trump wants a bill and he wants it fast. And Massey says, "No, we need 3 days to read it." They're going to boot him off the rules committee right then.
Yeah. And to me, that's the hypocrisy of this whole enterprise, the hypocrite. Because when Democrats are in charge, it's all about spending, taxing, and blah, blah, blah. When Republicans are in charge, it's about spending, taxing, and blah, blah, blah. There is no confirmable difference between the way Washington runs. The only thing that's different is how they spend the money. And I want to go to this question from Joe. Who did Doge better, Elon or Rand? I think that question has the obvious answer.
Well, Rand has proven himself, and Elon still has to prove himself here. So what I would say is the guy who has voted consistently against these spending bills in the Senate is Rand Paul. And he's voted consistently to try to cut a lot of the waste. I mean, we've seen him on TV sometimes for hours going through how much waste is in these appropriations bill. So, you know, Rand is the best senator out there that we have, and he's done it for a long time now. I think he knows how to do it. He knows what to cut. Elon's coming in new. I think that he's a little bit bright-eyed right now, and that he's like coming in, he's excited. It's a new thing. I'm going to go help Donald Trump cut government, but it's going to be tough as soon as there's pushback, as soon as he sees that, wait, these guys aren't actually as serious as I thought about cutting government. I think that's going to be a real revelation to him that maybe he doesn't see, because he's really new to it. You know, he's new to politics. He's not been involved in the past in any significant way. So I think it's going to be revelation, and Elon could be great at this. He could help cut a lot of government, but he's going to have to really push back against the machine if he's going to do that. It's going to cause some tension and conflict.
Eric, before I let you jump in here real quick, I want to ask this question to Congressman Amash, and then I would like you to introduce Dee's question because it's very relevant. Are you, as an American citizen, comfortable with these oligarchs having such influence in our government? Because if anybody's paying attention to geopolitical politics, what's going on in Russia, you know, as far as how these very, very rich people influence government, I don't want to talk about Ukraine at all, but I want to say this. If the United States had gone into Ukraine, this shit would have been over 2 years ago. The corruption in Russia has led them to be completely ineffective in the United States style regime change business, because they have failed in Ukraine and now they have failed in Syria. Do you think the United States can withstand billionaires corrupting our government to that extent where they could choose who gets elected And can we prosper as a nation under such, so to speak?
So I don't think that we should have a system that's centered around a few very wealthy people deciding what happens. Right now, what I see with Elon and others is they're trying to influence things, but they're not, as far as I can see, doing it in some kind of corrupt way. I don't think they're actually affecting legislation in any serious way right now. He certainly went out there and ran a super PAC to help Donald Trump. But, in this world, there are so many super PACs out there helping all sorts of people. And I'm not sure it kind of balances out when you have one doing it one way, another doing it the other way. So I don't have issues with that in the sense that, okay, people are free to use their own money. He earned money and he's free to use it to influence people. And, it's a freedom of speech, this ability to spread his own ideas. But if there were someone in government, someone really wealthy, and there was some real corruption going down where you are actually writing laws to give special favors to this person, special benefits, it becomes its own sort of like protected class of people who are getting benefits from the government. That's a real problem. And I would obviously object to that. And I've always objected to that. And in fact, I've long said that I think our system is a form of oligarchy, the way it's been implemented in recent times. That's not to say that it's all just rich people oligarchy. It's an oligarchy of elites. And that oligarchy includes people like Nancy Pelosi or Paul Ryan. And it includes those type of people, Chuck Schumer, people who are, Mitch McConnell is another example of this. People who might not be billionaires, but they have a lot of influence on the system, and they are actually using powers in a corrupt way. They are controlling Congress in a way that is contrary to the way it's supposed to work. They are actually the people trying to thwart democracy, as much as like a Nancy Pelosi talks about she's defending democracy. She would prevent bills from coming to the floor if it wasn't going to go her way. So the system is rigged in her favor. And there's this kind of oligarchy where three people, the president of the United States, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader, basically run all of government. And it's a rotating oligarchy. So you have different people come in. You got Trump now instead of Biden. And, you might have, a new Senate Majority Leader instead of an old Senate Majority Leader, that kind of thing. It changes, but it's the same kind of system in that those people run everything. When you serve as a member of Congress, you see this very acutely. You're on the House floor, and people are basically, like I said, the vast majority of them, 70, 80% of them, are just pressing the button that they're told to press, because these leaders exert so much pressure on them that they can't do the other thing. If they press the wrong button, guess what happens to this person? No money's coming to their campaign. They're going to get a primary opponent. They're going to get kicked off a committee. They're going to lose their chairmanship. They're not going to get a chairmanship. They're not going to get a committee. There's all sorts of things that will be used against them. So basically, there is an oligarchy, and it could get entwined in the future with actually very rich people. But there's basically an oligarchy already of people who are controlling the system, and it's just a few people controlling everything. And so, yes, I am concerned about oligarchy. I've said we have, an oligarchy with the ornamentation of representative government or representative democracy. It looks outwardly like we have some kind of representative system, but actually it's not like that at all. And that's a very big concern. And one of the things that I care deeply about, and why I fought so hard in Congress against that kind of system.
Eric, can you introduce Dee's comment and then go into your segment?
Yes. So Dee's asking, do you think Ross will be free day 1, day 2, or even ever under Trump?
So I've thought about making predictions on this, but I don't want to because it's a real person's life at stake here, and I hope that he is freed on day one, as the president has promised. And I'll just leave it at that. I think that when a president comes, I mean, Biden should have commuted the sentence already. He didn't do it. President Trump has promised to do it. Okay, we should hold him to it. And that's what I can say. If it doesn't happen on day one, we got to hold him to it and make sure it happens on day two.
All right, I agree. So I'm gonna switch gears if Marcus doesn't matter.
Go ahead.
I ran a poll on X and I kind of asked like, hey, what are these top 4 things we should talk about? I said number 1, what is wrong with Congress? You kind of just went over that. And you've done multiple podcasts where you specifically discuss who broke Congress and how it's broken. And if you want to plug those later, you can, or tell people where they can go find it. That didn't win the poll. That came in 3rd, I think. I said, what is wrong with the Libertarian Party and how can we fix it? That won by 67%. So, and that was kind of what I think I said in the initial invitation onto the podcast. We'd like to have you on to discuss that and other topics. I guess I don't want to speak for you, but I do want to set this up correctly. You, before you left Congress, switched to independent, switched to libertarian, didn't run for re-election, but you ran an exploratory committee to pursue the presidential nomination within the Libertarian Party. Mm-hmm. I heard rumors that people within, like, I don't know if it was Libertarian Party leadership or specifically a certain caucus leadership or just like popular people within the party kind of told you spend some time in the party before you pursue the nominee or nomination. If that's not true, please, could you correct the record? And also, did the party seem like they could offer you any help in running a presidential campaign?
So, as to your first question, there are, of course, people who say things like that. I wouldn't say that was the main line I was getting from the party. But there are always going to be people who say, hey, you got to spend more time in the party if you want to run for the nomination. I mean, they didn't necessarily feel the same way when it was RFK Jr., but, people will say that from time to time, okay, you got to spend more time in the party. So that does happen. What's the second part was
when you were running your exploratory committee, did you see any help? Was there going to be any help from the Libertarian Party for a presidential campaign? Had you received the nomination? And did that have any reason for why you decided not to run?
So I don't think the Libertarian Party had the resources at the time to run the campaign effectively. Now, that's not, to slight the leadership of the party at that time. I think, they were doing what they could with the circumstances they had. I think it's more on me. I don't want to say it was the party's fault in that sense. I am a realist about this stuff. When I run for office, you can bank on the fact that I believe I'm going to win if I'm going to run. That's always true. I'm not going to jump into something I don't think I can win. Now, I ran for Senate recently. I didn't win, but I did believe I could win, and there was definitely a path to victory. But it didn't work out the way I had hoped. For that Libertarian Party nomination race, I was confident I was going to get the nomination. I was very confident about that. I thought that it was unlikely I wouldn't get it. But I thought it was very likely that I would get, I don't know, maybe a 5% max in the general against Trump and Biden, because I could see how polarizing the whole thing was. It was just very polarizing. If I'd run in 2016, that's a different story. That's a much more open race for a libertarian, I think, that could be successful. By 2020, people are so polarized that it was very hard to get off the ground. And I'm not the kind of person who's going to say to the Libertarian Party, hey, I just showed up. You're going to give me the nomination. You've trusted me with that. And then all I'm going to go get you is maybe 5%. If you're going to give me that kind of trust, I got to go get you 15%, 20%. And I'd like to win, but I'm being realistic about it. I think a Libertarian Party candidate can get 15 or 20%, and that would make that would be a monumental shift if you could do that, because the next time around, people are now taking you more seriously and they're thinking about it. Okay, maybe the Libertarian Party is legit. The hardest part is getting to about 15 or 20. If you can get to 15 or 20 as a party, it's much easier to get to 30 or 35 or 40. That first 15 to 20 is the toughest by far, because that's where you're trying to convince people to take you seriously. And I did not think I could get there in 2020. I did not think I could get us there. There were a lot of factors. Short time period. I got into the race, I think in April or something, maybe April, I believe. So, for that few months, there weren't that many months left to get it off the ground and get it running. I just didn't think I could pull it off. And so for me, I felt a responsibility to the Libertarian Party, which I do care about. I'm still a member of the Libertarian Party. I want to be clear. I'm a lifetime member. I still feel highly connected to the Libertarian Party because it's a party, for whatever its faults, at least I think reflects a lot of my principles and values. Now, not everyone's a great messenger for the party. I get that. But I think, like, at its core, the party stands for a lot of what I believe in. And so I felt a strong responsibility to the party at the time not to be the nominee if I didn't believe I could make a huge impact, because I thought that would actually be detrimental to the party. Could you imagine someone with my level of name ID and recognition? I just been a congressman for 10 years. I come in, but then I still only get about 5%. I thought it wasn't going to be good for the party. I thought it would actually hurt the party. The other thing is, at the time, and this is should be no surprise to anyone, I realized that a lot of the ways in which it was being described in the media was I was the anti-Trump guy. And I don't think the Libertarian Party should be defined by that, nor should it be defined as pro-Trump. But it shouldn't be defined as anti-Trump. And even though I'm not anti-Trump in the sense that the media was talking about, I was just doing my job. The fact that I supported impeachment, I'd support impeachment of Biden. I'd support impeachment of Obama if it came up. I'd support impeachment of pretty much any president. They're all violating the law. So people viewed that as anti-Trump. I wasn't really anti-Trump, but the media was expressing it that way. And I don't think it's good for a party to be defined by that kind of characteristic. Now, enough years have gone by where if I were a candidate in the future, I'm not saying I'm going to be. I feel like a lot of that is dissipated, and you can talk about other things. But at the time, you got to remember, this is like not long after impeachment. And so it was for a lot of people, it's like a very defining characteristic about Justin Amash. And I did not want to put that on the party. So it was out of respect for the party and what they were trying to do. And I can tell you that a lot of people within the party were upset that I dropped out and decided not to do it. From a lot of the leadership. They wanted me to do it, but I did not feel like it was in the best interest of the party.
On the record, the Black Powder podcast has always stood by this fact. I thought this election cycle was the best opportunity for a libertarian to showcase what the Libertarian Party is, because nobody wanted the choices that we had. Even after Biden dropped out, nobody wanted the choices that we had. Harris, I couldn't stand her. I'm from California. I'm in California. I've hated her since she was our AG. She has been nothing but a shit show. And Trump, I will never forgive him for his lack of leadership during the COVID response. He was the reason Biden was able to take the so-called pandemic and impose the government's will on the American people, because he opened the door. He was the one that's saying government is going to take care of you and you need to do this. That's what Trump did. And I can't believe Americans forgot all of that shit. That pisses me the hell off. And with that being said, I want to talk about California.
Yeah. Can I say quickly before you, that I think you're right about 2024 being a good cycle, but for libertarians to run. But it was an odd cycle because you had RFK Jr., and he had a lot of resources and good name recognition. And I think it became very difficult then for an LP candidate to get off the ground. So there was just too much. It was too crowded.
Was he a plant? Was he a plant against us?
I don't think so. But I'll just say it was too crowded. It was too crowded, and that made it difficult because no matter what you run for LP, you're kind of then viewed initially, at least, as the fourth best candidate, right? Like the fourth most likely. You're not going to have as much resources as RFK Jr. And so that made it very difficult for an LP candidate.
Yeah, because the LP candidate, we had Chase on here, I think 2 or 3 times. I met him in person 2 times. He's a great guy. He is not as villainous as a lot of people painted him to be. And I still thought he was better than Trump or Biden because I have personal beef with Trump and Biden. I think Harris was also a shitty candidate. And if I was to actually choose between Trump, Biden, or Harris, I would choose Chase all day, whether you figure he has flaws or not. We all know the uniparty duopoly is not the answer at this point if you believe in individual liberty. And that's the core principle of what I believe in. And, you can dissect that as you may about Chase and what you don't like about him. But the simple fact is you're getting the exact same thing. If Harris had won, there would be no policy difference. There would be no spending cuts that you want. There would be nothing because they spend the same amount of money, and that's a proven fact. They just spend it on different things.
I think people get this wrong all the time. The difference between, say, Biden and Trump on a lot of these issues is not that big. Like nope. I look at Biden, Trump, Harris. A lot of their policies are very close. And when you're on the inside, you see this so clearly. Like when you're on the inside, when you're in Congress and you actually see the bills that are coming up and what people are signing, it's basically the same stuff. Whether you got Obama, Trump, Biden, they're signing the same multi-trillion-dollar omnibus spending bill. Yeah, it's tweaked a little bit this way or that way, but those bills are always bipartisan, which people assume means good, and it doesn't mean good.
No.
Okay. Sometimes bipartisan is good. Sometimes it's really bad. A lot of times it's really bad. And this is with these huge omnibus bills, it's bad. And so you have people spending that kind of money, and the president, whether it's Biden or Trump or Obama, they're signing that bill. What about wars overseas? It's the same stuff. Now, like people will say, okay, Trump didn't start any new wars. Okay, well, then you'd have to say Biden didn't start any new wars.
He didn't.
I mean, you'd have to say the same thing. But that's not a good enough assertion, because what matters is not are they starting new wars. There's this thing called the 2001 AUMF, which I'm sure you guys know about, but for people at home who don't know, that's the 2001 authorization for use of military force. Yeah. This was passed after 9/11. It says explicitly in this AUMF that it's to go after the perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks. But you know what the government does instead? All of our presidents since then. They use it for whatever. It's like whatever action you want to take, they just say 2001 AUMF. They want to bomb this country, they say 2001 AUMF. They want to bomb that country, 2001 AUMF. They just say everything is some kind of terrorism. It doesn't matter if these terrorists were involved in 9/11. It's just it's a terrorist group. So, okay, 2001 AUMF. So this is what I've called the forever war. And it's aptly described as the forever war because there's an authorization on the book. All the presidents rely on it. None of them want it repealed. And they just rely on it forever. They drop bombs here or there. 2001 AUMF. Well, Trump was doing that. He dropped as many bombs in some of those years as Obama was dropping.
He kept Syria. Yeah, Trump kept Syria as hot as any war across the whole world.
Same with the troops. The number of troops that were in the Middle East under Trump, up until the very end, it was higher under Trump than when Obama left office. So, there's a lot of like revisionist history and talking about like, the peace president and this kind of thing. But all these presidents we've had recently, whether it's Trump, Obama, Biden, they're very similar. It takes surveillance, unconstitutional surveillance. They can say all they want. Donald Trump or anyone else can say all they want. Oh, I don't like spying. I don't want them spying on me. I don't want them spying on Americans. But when push came to shove, he signed the bill that allows the spying. And I promise you, in this coming administration, that bill is going to come up again. This is FISA 702. And he's going to sign it again. And it's sad because I even saw Tulsi Gabbard. She switched her position on this. For years, she had voted against FISA 702. She had spoken out against it. And now she's like, okay, actually, it's not so bad. And this is what you get. The administration will just, present it as, oh, it's not as bad. The other stuff is actually bad. This is not the bad one. Even though this is one of the worst ones. They'll present it as this one's not bad. So all I'm saying is on a lot of these issues, I brought up today on X, civil asset forfeiture is another one. Same under Biden as it was under Trump. Trump actually expanded.
Yeah, he did.
Civil asset forfeiture. So, all I'm asking the public to do is let's look at what these people are actually doing. Let's look at let's not focus on what they're saying. Let's look at what they're actually doing when they're in office. And when they're in office, they're so similar. And this is why, yes, the Libertarian candidate, whoever it is, tends to be a lot better than the establishment candidates from the duopoly, because they're just presenting you the same stuff and they're packaging it a little different. Maybe they're giving corporate welfare to different people or whatever, but it's the same crap.
Eric, before you intercede real quick.
Go ahead.
I just want to talk about the state of California, because when we talk about Democrat, Republicans, and independents and libertarians and whatnot, a lot of people don't know California is effectively a 33 state, plus or minus 3 to 4 to 5% as far as registered voters. Why can't libertarians deliver an effective message to the American voters in the obvious face of this bipartisan bullshit?
Well, that's a good question. The answer is the Libertarian Party has to be a vehicle for organizing like-minded people to win elections. If it's not doing that, it's not doing its job. This has always been my position. The Libertarian Party is not a social club. It is not a PAC. It's not an activist organization. It shouldn't be around just to, we can influence the Republicans or influence the Democrats. It needs to be an actual political party that tries to win elections. To do that, you have to have a pretty broad base of supporters. You're not going to have the what we might call the purist libertarians in your party if it's a broad-based party. That's a fact. But what else does it mean to be a political party? A political party, by definition, if you're going to be effective, you got to probably get 35-40% of the voters to consider you, because you have to win some kind of plurality in the very least. So you have to think about the public, and we've got to, at least as a party, reach 35 to 40% of the voters. And it's honestly not that hard to do. It's tough to do if you focus on all the minutia. If you focus on every little thing and we fight over every little, well, this libertarian thinks that and that libertarian, one person supports Mises, one supports Hayek, and one person's a Friedman person. If you focus on all that stuff, you'll never be a real party. The reason Republicans and Democrats are successful is because they don't focus on any of that stuff. In fact, Trump himself is basically like, oh, we don't even need a platform.
No.
Trump tells the Republican Party, we don't even need a platform. Whatever, screw the platform. Who needs it?
He just looks at the polls.
Yeah, he's trying to bring a certain number of people who are like-minded together. And the Libertarian Party needs to focus on that. That doesn't mean abandoning your principles. The party should never promote ideas that are against its principles. It should not push ideas that are against its principles, but it needs to state principles, state ideas that are broadly appealing and bring in those 35 or 40% who agree with those things. And I'm sure you could get it. For example, there is no party right now that is for cutting taxes and spending and for ending the forever war and for protecting your privacy and your rights. There's no party for that.
Nope.
Not one. So if you just took those three simple things, you could build a pretty big coalition. And there's some other things you can bring on too. There is no party for those things. So you don't have to get into the minutia. You just need to have some kind of broad ideas that people can rally around, that you can bring a third of the country, maybe 40% together on these ideas. And in fact, at first, maybe you're only bringing in 25, 30. That's fine. But you're big enough to be competitive. You're shaking things up. You're winning in some places, maybe not in others, but you're winning in some places. So in my opinion, the Libertarian Party consistently misses this opportunity to reach people because it's not too often the people in leadership. And this is not, again, I don't want to be saying I'm criticizing any particular leadership because this has been going on for 50 years, right? Too often, the people in leadership are not interested in being an actual party. They're interested in promoting their own brand, their own ideas, and they're perfectly happy having maybe 2% or 3% of the public behind them. But that's fine if you want to run a club, an activist group, a PAC, or something like that. But this is a political party. Yeah. Why have a political party if you don't want to win elections? It doesn't make any sense. So that's my take on it.
Eric?
So you kind of just answered my question. What do you think LP needs to do to be competitive third party or competitive major party? Do you think there's a difference? Should we shoot for just being competitive in local races first, which is some people's idea or strategy, or do we need good national level messengers for the Libertarian Party? I know that's a big question.
So this is going to surprise some people because I hear this all the time. I think it needs to be national focused, and I'll tell you why. This is not to say that you shouldn't run people in local races, but actually this is counter to what conventional wisdom is. But if you think about it, it makes sense. The easiest race for a libertarian to win is president. And I want to tell you why. It's because people at home are most comfortable with a libertarian president. They are actually least comfortable with a libertarian at the local level. Because at the local level, you want all sorts of services from your government, right? Nobody wants like the neighborhood association guy to be a libertarian. Because okay, you cut your grass to whatever height you want. You can throw trash on your lawn. You can do this. You can do, okay, there's a flood on my property. The river's coming up. Oh, well, that's your business, not ours. Nobody wants that in local government. I'll be blunt with you. Like a few of us like it to be libertarian as far down as possible. And it's not that many people. Now at the federal level, if you offer them a libertarian president, there's a lot of people on board with that because they know that that is out of control. They know it's totally out of control. And at the federal level, it's where you have a constitution that is very strong. At the local level, like even the state of Michigan, I'll give you an example. the state of Michigan Constitution is terrible. It's a garbage constitution. Okay. Why? Because they amend it every couple years. It's not good. I never go around saying, oh, I got to defend the Michigan Constitution. Like it's so valuable. It's so wonderful. If they started over with the Michigan Constitution, it'd be fine. Now, it doesn't mean you should violate the Michigan Constitution. I want to be clear. You should follow the Constitution. But it's not a good Constitution. If you rewrote it right now, I'd say, great, you probably write something better. The U.S. Constitution, though, is a brilliant document. And it provides very little room for a president to do what he wants, right? He's bound. So is Congress. Now, all you have to be as a libertarian candidate for president is someone who says, I'm going to follow the Constitution. I will follow the Constitution. Now you're aligned with the founding document of our government, of our current government. That's all you got to say. And if you just follow the Constitution, you'll be 1,000 times more libertarian than anyone who's been president in recent decades. So it's not that hard at the federal level if you're running for president or even like Senate or a high level federal office to say, yeah, I'm a libertarian, vote for me. What are you going to do? I'm going to follow the Constitution. Okay. Local level, even like Michigan government level, if I said I'm going to follow the Constitution, well, the Constitution allows all sorts of nonsense. I mean, it almost doesn't mean anything to say you'll follow the Michigan Constitution. It's so broad, it allows you to do just about anything. So it's not that great for a libertarian. It's better than say local, but it's not as good as federal. So I think you have to have a national party, a national brand, because the easiest race for libertarians to win is at the highest level. And I'll say too, at the local level, though I've run, at the state level. My hardest race, my most difficult race was my run for state house, because you have the fewest resources. And I know there are a lot of libertarian candidates out there who just don't have the resources. They're running for state house. They don't get any attention on TV or anything if you're running for like a local level. You don't have any resources. Nobody cares about backing you. As you get higher up, you can find some people who will support you, will back you. You'll get some national TV appearances. You can find alternative ways to gain momentum that you can't find if you're just walking door to door at the local level. Now, I'm not trying to dissuade any libertarians from running at the local level. I think it's valuable for the party to have people across the board. But I'm just saying, I think it's actually more difficult. Sometimes people say, well, we've had local libertarians win, but I think it's almost always in nonpartisan races where you don't even know that the person's a libertarian, and they're not even like marketing themselves as particularly libertarian in their materials. And so you don't really know. But yeah, I think the higher up, the easier it is to win. And that's why the Libertarian Party has to have a national brand.
Awesome. I could say this. There's one of my friends in the HOA that had mentioned where I live of me joining the board, and I'm pretty much I told her I couldn't because I can't support communism. I just can't do. I don't like HOAs. I don't like the fact that your neighbor can say, hey, you have too many chairs in your front yard. It bothers me, and that's what HOAs do. And I'm like, okay, I get this. And they always like to say, well, we're just trying to maintain property values. I was like, obviously you understand the free market, because property values are not determined by HOAs. That's negligible. You can't say a HOA will maintain your property value when, I've lived through the Great Recession where I bought my home for $180,000 20-something years ago. It went up to $425,000, and then it dropped to negative balance, and now it's over $600,000. That had nothing to do with the HOA over those 20 years. That was the market, and that's what people don't understand about libertarianism. We're not for oligarchs. We're not for people who are going to abuse the system. We're about fair and free markets. And if you want freedom, if you want economic freedom, first and foremost, that's what every American should want, because you could work for slave wages. But if you want to be able to improve your situation and move forward, we have to have a free and fair market. And what government does, it picks winners and losers. And that's the main thing that people don't understand about Congress, and why 51% of them are millionaires, is because they're helping picking winners and losers in publicly traded companies and changing the game. Nancy Pelosi is better than Blackbeard, any pirate you can imagine that existed during that era. Nancy Pelosi would blow their ships out of the water, because she has done so much insider trading with her and her husband over the last 40 plus years of her in Congress, that it's sickening that Americans are too stupid to understand that this duopoly uniparty bullshit has not affected their position in life. The natural forces of economic expansionism have built wealth, not Congress. And they don't want to recognize that, because when our politicians step before us to that podium, they're trying to express like, you wouldn't exist if I didn't behest that upon you. And Justin Amash was one of those difference makers, along with Massey. And I've spoken to this on this podcast previously. I'm not necessarily the greatest fan of Rand. His dad, yes, but not Rand, because Rand got beat up by his neighbor. I don't like that.
That's mean.
Rand should have threw left and rights or double odd buck. That's the way I see it. When your neighbor's tripping, there's only two ways to handle it. Either you got hands or you got double odd buck. There's no middle ground between that shit, because you're so present. My dad was a former cop with LAPD, and he always told me, you don't know if that person is willing to kill you. And so you need to be prepared to kill them. If they address you in an aggressive fashion, you should not be the one that's the one that's not willing to kill your opponent. And that's just life in general. But we're about to close this up, Eric, because we don't want to keep this distinguished. We want him to come back at least twice a year and grace us with his presence.
You
So
could be a permanent co-host.
I mean, anytime you want, that's 100%. You could actually be a co-host. We're doing 3 to 5 million interactions on Facebook a month. And, I'm going to brag about that. But if Justin Amash wanted to become part of the Black Powder podcast, he'd be more than occasional guest. He could be a member of the Wu-Tang Libertarian clan if he so chose. That'd be awesome. But I'm going to hand this off to Eric and his closing remarks towards our distinguished guest. If you want to ask him a final question or whatever.
Yeah. So real quick, I don't know that we really got into your campaign for Senate. You ran as a Republican. I'm not trying to end this in a sour note, so maybe we should get another follow-up question. But why did you decide to run for Senate? And after action review, like 3 improves, 3 sustains, what do you think maybe you could do better next time if you decide to run for office?
Yeah, so I thought about running for Senate for a while. I mean, it's something I've thought about in the past. And I saw an opportunity here to win and make a difference. And I'd heard from so many people, here in this community, it's been so welcoming to me, and especially in West Michigan. I live in the Grand Rapids area. And so everywhere I go, people are telling me, hey, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for what you did in office. Can I take a picture? And I know just deep down, this is not happening to a lot of former members of Congress. I don't think they are changing the lives of a lot of young people with what they're doing. I had a lot of young people coming up and saying, you're the reason I'm interested in politics and that kind of thing. And it was very impactful on me. And so I thought, okay, I'll run for Senate, and there's an opportunity to win this one. Now, I did not think there was an opportunity to win it outside of the two parties, especially in this cycle. I thought you had to run as a Republican or a Democrat. I've been a Republican in the past. I've run as a Republican before. So I thought, okay, I can run as a Republican here. And let's try to win this primary. And I was confident if I could get through the primary, I was going to get through the general. I was 100% confident I'm going to win that general election. All the polling and other things indicated that and showed me I could win the general. The tough part was the primary, getting past that hill, because I have to convince a lot of Republican voters at the same time that, Trump is running for office to vote for me. And so that's a challenge, of course. But I believed it was doable if enough people could get behind me early on. Now, part of the problem, this is, again, I'll talk about things I did wrong. Some of it was timing related. I started late. I didn't intend to start late. I don't know if I've talked about this publicly, but, I'd been planning to announce in October. But I'm the son of a Palestinian refugee, and my announcement date was going to be October 9. And I did not want to make an announcement after October 7. A couple days later, I come in and I announce I'm running, and then have people misinterpret it, or maybe just discriminate against me even. Just like, okay, well, we don't support you because you're Palestinian. There's a lot of that stuff that still goes on, honestly. And so I held off. I delayed. I waited. I tried to weigh the situation. Also, if I had announced at that point, every question was going to be about Israel and Palestine. Every single question I got. So it was going to take the focus off of the kind of campaign I wanted to run. This is sort of this similar problem to what I faced when I was considering a presidential run. I didn't want the focus to be on impeachment. Here, I didn't think it was a good idea if the whole focus is Israel and Palestine when I'm running. So I waited. Unfortunately, I had to wait long enough a few months later where I think I was too far behind in terms of getting off the ground. And then it was tough. Even though we had a spectacular fundraising month when I first announced, it was then tough to get the resources because Trump jumped in pretty quickly after I announced. And I think this was on purpose because he saw the threat that I would be and I had a good chance of winning. He jumped in and immediately endorsed Mike Rogers, who's a big surveillance state hack, like one of the worst members of Congress I ever served with. Truly, like if you're talking about deep state politician, it's this guy. And Trump came in and endorsed him just shortly after I got into the race. And so once that happened, it was tough to raise the money. It was tough to get outside groups to come in and support me. Even the ones that were on my side, liberty-oriented groups, conservative groups that wanted to support me, they were like, well, I don't know. We don't really want to go up against Trump. So it just became very difficult at that point. And so that's what went wrong with that Senate race. And so I've learned some lessons from that. I think you got to start earlier. I think you have to think about all the challenges you'll face and make sure you have some of the outside support locked up beforehand. Also, there were members of Congress who I thought would come in and endorse me pretty quick, and that didn't happen. And I think it's related again to the Trump stuff, that Trump came in and endorsed my opponent. It's not because they were going to go then and support my opponent. He was a terrible guy, but it was hard to get them to go against Trump. So that was the challenge. And I've learned a lot of lessons from that. And I think it's a winnable race, even as a Republican and running a Republican primary. In the state of Michigan, I want to be clear. It's very hard to run as a libertarian or independent. We have straight ticket voting. And the ballot access laws make it difficult to come in outside of the two parties. So I think that it's important to understand there's a dynamic here that makes you choose Republican or Democrat. That's a little bit different from a lot of other states. But I've learned a lot, and it's unfortunate because I think that 2024 was by far the best chance to win it.
Yeah.
If I had gotten into that general election, I was going to win it 100%. Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee, he lost, which is what I said would happen. He was clearly underperforming Trump by a significant margin throughout the entire campaign. And then he lost. Even though Trump won the state, the Republican Senate candidate lost. I would have won that Senate campaign if I were in the general election. So I've learned my lessons on that. And again, I don't know what I'll do in the future. Like I said, I think the political party label doesn't matter that much. I would love to see the Libertarian Party become a force, but I don't think parties are what matters. I think what matters is that you have a set of principles that you stand by, and then you choose the vehicle that has the best chance of getting you across the finish line. And in Michigan, for me, it might be the Republican Party, but in a lot of other states, it might be Libertarian. Or if you run for president, maybe it's Libertarian. So like it really depends. I don't think anyone should get too caught up in political parties in the sense of like, oh, it's like the be all end all, and we got to worship the party. The party is not there for worship. The party is just a vehicle for getting people across the finish line. We should work to build a competitive Libertarian Party, but that's not the thing we should value most. You know, we got to value candidates with the right principles.
Gotcha.
First of all, and this is not an indictment against any people's. Don't come at me, bitches. But my birthday is October 7th. And I want to send my condolences to Congressman Amash for your family, because I know you had some family that lost their lives in this conflict. And I'm of the non-aggression principle. I am a California legal firearms owner to the most and maximum. And I believe in violence. Violence is a solution when people bring violence to you, because you cannot fight violence with peace. I firmly believe that. But there is an aggression principle when the people are not free, when the people have not seen justice from the occupying or overbearing power, where they have a right and a principle to defend themselves. I firmly believe in that, because you cannot let another human being determine. I used to tell the kids that I used to coach, don't let anybody else write your story. And that's, I think, a firm principle that I was trying to teach. I taught my kids that, but when I coached, I'm not trying to influence them other than what their parents are teaching them. But I always told the kids I coach, write your own story. Because at the end of the day, the only person you're responsible for is yourself. And if you're responsible for yourself, you're not going to do harm to others, because you don't want them doing harm to you. And that's a grand societal aspect where you can want that. But I wanted to mention that to you, because in the pregame, when I was reading more about you, I read about your family in Palestine. I just wanted to send
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm praying for peace. I'm hopeful they can find some peace over there. I would love to see a world where there in the Holy Land, Jews, Christians, and Muslims can all live together peacefully as brothers and sisters. They all come from the same place originally, and let's all live together in peace.
Yeah, like it used to be before. The European powers decided to turn that into the last bastion of European colonialism. People can come at me for that, but that's the historical fact. And I'm not trying to say nobody. I don't want to see anybody subjected to tyranny. Not one person, not one person of a religious belief, not one person of an ethnic belief. I think everybody just wants every human being effectively wants the same thing: food, shelter, clothing, and the ability to raise their next generation in peace. That's what all people want. The only thing that has ever gotten in the way of that is government. And my shirt says, if you could read that, government ruins everything. And that is the core principle, one of the core principles of Marcus Matthews, the only real libertarian. And we're going to start wrapping this up. And before we do, we had every libertarian presidential candidate on this podcast in 2024 2 or more times.
Almost. We missed Bailey, and we missed another guy. I can't remember who. But yeah, we tried getting every one of the libertarian candidates for president on here. So,
and what we have spoke about since the election in 2020, November 5th, 4th or whatever. In 2016, libertarians got 4 million votes. In 2020, we got 2.3 million votes. In 2024, we barely touched 650,000 votes. In 2028, can we get a Justin Amash to come and be our savior and deliverance? Because it's going to, in 2028, it's going to take a name. It's going to take a person who's been there. Like Gary Johnson, he was a governor and he had name recognition. And I'm not trying to throw that upon you right now because we talked about it, what was good and what wasn't good in the pregame about what we would discuss on this show. But all I'm saying is the Black Powder podcast had effectively 98% of we had maybe -2 of the presidential candidates in the Libertarian Party come on this podcast at least twice in 2024. Now we're in 2025. We have the front runner, I would say. Would you stand on any kind of consideration for running for that in right now?
So I'm not going to say I'm not open to it. I'm open to it, but let's build a libertarian party that can win. We've got time between now and 2028 to build a libertarian party that can win. I think that's important. I'd like to be a part of that. Again, regardless of like what I'm doing in politics here in Michigan, I think the Libertarian Party is important and we should try to make it into a competitive party. Like I've said before, parties aren't the be all end all, but it is important. It's important to get out there and build something that can compete with the duopoly, because they keep putting the same thing forward. And the only way we're going to get something different is by offering an alternative. And so let's build that alternative.
I appreciate your time, Eric. Do you have anything else?
Man, that was great. I enjoyed it. And my closing statements, let your guy Thomas Massey know he needs to check his DM so he can come on the Black Powder podcast.
I'll talk to him about it.
Congressman Massey, do you want to talk about any enterprises you have or any way that people can stay in contact with you?
Yeah, Amash, not Massey. You're getting me mixed up with Massey now.
My bad. You guys are almost interchangeable.
I'm sorry.
I always thought it's funny because we don't look alike, but people in Congress would sometimes mix us up too. Like we'd be walking the halls. So someone would say Thomas or Massey. And I'm like, oh no.
That was a complete IPA slip. And I'm going to bring that on the IPAs. I apologize for that, but
no, it's okay.
Congressman Amash, do you have anything you want to say or how they can stay in touch with you or follow you or whatever?
Well, I'd just say follow me on X. I'm at Justin Amash. That's the best way to keep up with me. And I'll have some things in the works in the next few months. So, just keep an eye on things and I'll be there.
Sweet.
And I would ask you to help expand the Liberty message by recommending the Black Powder podcast, because I think you had a grand time on here tonight. And
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
that's the energy I'm gonna put out to you. That's what I'm doing right now, and that's good energy. That's not satanic or of any other false god energy that I'm putting out. But I just want to thank you, dude, because this was when Eric told me that you were coming on, dude. I was like super hyped because even though I recently confused you with Massey only because of the libertarian principles of the thing,
It's understandable.
I truly respect what you have done because you stood against the machine, and that's what the Libertarian Party and roughly 33 to 35% of Americans in general truly believe, that America is this grand experiment that could be a higher and better place as far as liberty if we move away from one more choice than people get in North Korea. And that's what we have right now. And if that's the way I sum it up, and that's off the great Jesse Ventura, who got beat up by a Navy SEAL apparently and sued him. But that's neither here nor there. Thank you very much for coming on, and I hope we can have you on at least twice a year. We started this off at the beginning of the year, so that would place us at June and next January. So
yeah, we'll try to make it happen.
Yeah, because there's nothing else is going to happen on the only real libertarian podcast that has ever existed than having real libertarian conversations led by the only real libertarian in myself, and co-hosted by my guy Eric Parker, and we might have different guys on here and there. If Justin Amash wants to be a host on the Wu-Tang of Libertarian podcast, because I'm pretty sure your generation was raised. How old are you now? You're a dude, I can ask that shit.
44.
So you were raised by Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah. Should I be wearing sunglasses next time?
If you want.
Absolutely. If you have the ones, if you need to turn down the lights, the transitional lenses, whatever you need to do. But yeah, of course, I want to make you feel welcome because you're always welcome, as all libertarian people are, that people that believe in individual liberty. And with that being said, we're going to end with our slogan, because there's been one time that I've forgotten to say this, and it is live free or die.
Or die.
This is the Black Powder Podcast. Thank you for listening and watching.